Well, Happy New Year, everyone. My name is Beth, if I haven't had a chance to meet you, and I sure hope 2023 is not like that video for any of us. Watching that video actually stresses me out. But it also causes me great relief at the same time a little bit, because I'm like, yeah, that's my life some days. Is it your life some days? My family got to press pause. On Christmas Day, we flew out to sunny Arizona, and we got to spend some days there, and then we took a little road trip alongside my parents and headed to California, and we got to have some adventures together, some time of really rest and relaxation, and really made some memories. Got to go on some roller coasters, which are my favorite. Got to see the ocean, and I love seeing and being at the ocean and watching it through my kids' eyes. Like, it's just so special because it's so vast, and our kids are so small. And so really got to have just these moments together and not be on a schedule. You know, not have to run from one thing to the next thing and just really be together. But the one thing that we couldn't shut off, which Kyle and I tried really hard, was parenting, because we brought our kids. And we're driving along the road, and we're on this like 2-lane traffic-heavy road, and our daughter Isabel, she's 3 years old, and she got Peppa Pig for Christmas. And Ian and Izzy both put their windows down, and they were enjoying just the nice weather. Sorry, it was nice. Just enjoying the breeze coming through the window. And Izzy had her Peppa Pig really close to the open window. And both Kyle and I said, Izzy, put your Peppa Pig inside the car. We don't want your Peppa Pig to fly out the window. Please put your Peppa Pig in your lap. And she said, she kind of looked at us and she said, my Peppa Pig is just right here. I got it, real close to the window, real close to the window. And Kyle and I look at each other and we're like, what are the chances? The chances are pretty high that thing's flying out the window. And it isn't 2 minutes later, my Peppa Pig! And so I was thinking, leave Peppa Pig, because we told her. But Daddy turned around and spun around, and he parked the car, and he waited for the traffic to go by, and he made his way across the road to pick up Peppa Pig. And then he came back, and the look on his face was pretty priceless to see the hero dad with Peppa Pig in his hand. That's a good dad. That's a good dad. Now, the thing that was interesting is Izzy was super shocked that we put the window up when we brought Peppa Pig back. And she says to us, but no, I'll make sure to hang on to Peppa Pig. Which we replied, you already got that chance, sweetheart. You don't get to get that chance again. And you know what it made me think of? It made me think of you and I, and it made me think of things that happen in our life that maybe people around us have told us, or maybe even things that we know God wants us to do. Like in our walk with Jesus, there are certain topics and certain things, or maybe you love reading leadership books, and as the calendar turns, we all get hyper-focused on like new start, and that is so good. And there are things we know we should do if we want our life to be different or to be better. Or there's people around us telling us, here's what you might do to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish, or to become the person that you want to become. But just like Izzy and Peppa Pig, we just don't listen. We just don't listen sometimes. And there can be consequences to that. And so today, we're in our final week 2 of a series called Pause. And I don't think what I'm going to talk about is like a brand new topic. I don't think anything that I'm going to talk about today is going to be new or different. There might be some things that you're going to learn, but I have a gut feeling that as I get going in this message, you're going to kind of nod your head and be like, yep, heard that before. Yep, I know I should do that. But here's what I'll say. Is my desire for us all to listen to this is so high. My desire for all of us to actually live and breathe this idea of pause and rest in our life is so real. It's so red hot. And I wish, and it sounds, I don't know how it's going to sound to you today. I wish that you and I could just like super hold each other accountable to this in this next year of 2023, because I believe it can be a game changer. I believe it can be a game changer, because instead of looking at all the things that you could do in 2023, what would it look like to focus on who you want to be? And if there's any part of you that wants to be closer to Jesus, that wants to be someone who lives out the character of Jesus, the only way to do that is through some of the things that I'm going to talk about today. It's by finding some rhythms that you can grab hold of, where you're going to create the rhythm so that you have created space and time for Jesus to fill you up. And so if you were here last week on January 1st, you get a sticker. And I give away stickers when people do really great things. And so I'm celebrating you. If you were here on January 1st, way to go, you get a sticker. Doug talked about this idea that you can do less and be more. That's what I just talked about. And what did he mean by that? He meant that when you and I learn the rhythms of real rest, we can actually do less and we can be more. We're going to have more energy for the things that really matter in our life. And what I love about this idea of rhythms of rest and rhythms of pausing and rhythms of inviting Jesus to actually be the voice and the leader of our life is I love that puts us in a position where we're following. It puts us in a role where we're going to follow. What would it look like to follow Jesus' lead in 2023 in your life? And that's why we want to pause. We don't want to get ahead of Jesus. I don't want you to get ahead of Jesus and make a whole plan. And you're like, Jesus, come along. Come on. When Jesus is like, I already got a plan for your life. I'm just waiting for you to listen. And so today I'm going to talk about two relatively simple but hard things to put into place in each of our lives. And those two things are, how can we learn to pause and rest? That's the question I'm going to answer. I got two ways that we're going to do that. And it is so hard to begin to put these rhythms in place, because at the beginning, they aren't normal. At the beginning, it takes discipline and consistency, and you might not see results for months. You may not even see results for a year. But are you willing to do it if you know that it'll draw you closer to Jesus and help you to be more? I don't know. That's a question that you have to answer today. The first way that we can learn to pause and rest is make Sabbath a weekly rhythm. Make Sabbath a weekly rhythm. What do I mean by that? One thing we got to talk about, Sabbath in Hebrew means, the Hebrew word for Sabbath is Shabbat, and Sabbath means to rest. That's what that word means. Sabbath means to rest. And where does this idea of Sabbath come from? Well, it comes from way in the beginning in Genesis 2, 1-3. It says this: "Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array." So God created. He created all the heavens. He created all the earth. And when he was done by that, done with that, he said, by the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. The very simple takeaway is if God rested, then we have no excuse. We need rest too. And I know that's a big idea and a big thought, but it's biblical truth that if God rested, and one of the things that I love about being reminded every year that God rested and he made a day holy, is that he showed us by example. He showed us by his example of the need to rest. So if God rested, you and I need to rest too. I want to fast forward to the New Testament. I want to talk about Jesus. So Jesus came to be fully human and fully God. He came to experience the same things that you and I experience. And how did Jesus teach about the Sabbath? What once was put into like this religious box of like, you can't do all these things on the Sabbath. Jesus kind of wiped that away and said, Sabbath wasn't meant to be a check mark. It wasn't meant to be a like, did you do it or did you not do it? And did you do it right? That wasn't what Sabbath was meant for. And so what he came to share is that he helped them see that Sabbath was meant for them. Sabbath was meant for us. In Mark 2:27, it says this, then he said to them, that's Jesus, he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for you and I to rest. This idea of rest, setting aside a day to rest, was for you and I. And Jesus is saying that we need the Sabbath, and that's why it's a common practice, and it's there to help us. And so on a practical level, I want to talk about, like, what does that look like? What does it look like to rest? And here's what I want to encourage you to do. I want to encourage you to start thinking about what are 24 hours in your week? You got 7 days. What are 24 hours that you can set aside as a Sabbath where you're going to begin to rest every week? What does that look like? What can that look like? Take 24 hours every week from work. Take 24 hours every week from being on your phone. Put it away. Put it in a drawer for 24 hours every single week. Get away from disengagement to being totally present. That's what we sang about a little bit earlier. Is like we miss so many moments because we're in the rush and we're in the hustle and we're in the bustle and we're making ourselves available to everybody, when Jesus is saying, hey, I just need you for a little bit. I just need your full attention. I need you to be really engaged, and I need you to be present. What does it look like to rest for 24 hours? Resting does not look like vegging out on Netflix and eating popcorn or chips or your favorite snack. That's not rest. When you're done with that, typically you don't feel like full of life. Typically. Not saying it's not something that you shouldn't do every once in a while. I'm just saying that's not rest. Rest is where you feel most alive. When you feel like you are just totally present. One of the things that felt most restful for me on our vacation was in the front row of a roller coaster with my almost 8-year-old right next to me. With my hands up, screaming at every turn, looking at my son, saying, get your hands up, as he's like kind of terrified. And I was like, woo! And I got off, I was like, was that so fun? And he's like, Mom. Opposite personalities. I'm a little much for him sometimes. But for me, that roller coaster ride, I was so full. That was restful. That was rest. That felt full. Like, I want you to know as adults, it's okay to play. What does it look like for you to play? Here's what rest can look like. It can look like reading. It can look like sitting by the fire. It can look like playing board games with friends, getting competitive. It can look like cooking and eating an incredible meal, like maybe as a family. Again, you put away all technology for 24 hours. Every single week, I know we can do it. And you can just be present with each other. And everybody has a role, and you can cook an incredible meal together. Maybe it's dancing in the living room with the music blaring. Like, that's okay to do. It's okay to have fun. Like I said, riding a roller coaster, laughing with friends. Husbands, you're going to love this one. Having sex with your spouse. That can be rest. That can be play. I just made a ton of people uncomfortable. It's okay. That can be rest. You can spend time enjoying your spouse. You can spend time enjoying the people that are in your life. And you can have it every week. You can have rest like that every single week. Maybe you want to paint something. Maybe you want to go for a walk. Maybe you want to get creative. Maybe there's something that you've been missing that you used to love to do that you can find rest in and bring it back into your life. That's what a Sabbath is. Doesn't it sound fun? Doesn't it sound like refreshing and filling? And also in that time of Sabbath, as I'm on that roller coaster ride with my son, I'm experiencing Jesus in these moments. I'm experiencing gratefulness and thankfulness, and I'm watching my son be everything that God's made him to be, and I'm being thankful for that. And when I have time of laughter, I'm experiencing Jesus. In that time of 24 hours, you can set aside time to pray, to read your Bible, to connect with God, to be undistracted. Doesn't that sound amazing? What Sabbath looks like for me every week. And I would say 80 to 90% of my weeks, it works out. Sometimes I get more than 24 hours. Very rarely do I get less. From Friday noon to Saturday noon, that's my Sabbath. And I've gotten way better at what gets put into those 24 hours. I say no to quite a bit, and I say yes to the things that matter most to me during those 24 hours. One of my favorite things over the last year is that our family has regularly caught a rhythm on Saturday mornings where we go to a coffee shop and we play games, we play cards, and we have coffee, and we draw pictures, and we color, and we just sit. We sit together, and that's part of our Sabbath family rhythm. So that's what mine looks like, and I want you to begin to think about what can it look like for you. But you've got to pick a 24 hours, and then you've got to practice it, you've got to try it, and you've got to stay consistent with it. So how can we learn to pause and to rest? Number one, make Sabbath a regular rhythm. Number two, make time for silence and solitude. I know, you're thinking, I don't need that. I thought that too. I thought, I don't want to be by myself. I'm an extrovert. I don't want to sit somewhere by myself. I don't need to go sit in nature and sit alone and just wait and sit there and wait. Like, what am I supposed to do? And there's nobody around, and I don't know, maybe you've thought that, or maybe some of you that are more introverted, you're just craving more silence and solitude. That was one thing. Kyle's like, during our vacation, I'm just going to go for a walk. See you guys in a little bit? All right, honey. He likes a little time away, and that's good. But no matter how you're wired, this isn't a wiring. This is a biblical truth. No matter how you're wired, if you want to stay connected to Jesus, you've got to find silence and solitude to spend time with him. So what can that look like? What can that look like? It can look like a lot of things. I'm going to talk about that here in a second. But here's one thing I want to challenge us on, right? And it's that video. Our lives have never been louder. There's so much like coming at us and so much grabbing at our attention. And I want to ask you, when's the last time that you stood in line somewhere and you didn't look at your phone? Like you weren't trying to engage your mind in something. You weren't just sitting and being still. When's the last time you were in a waiting room and you weren't playing a game on your phone or answering texts or answering emails and you talked to the person sitting next to you in the waiting room? I mean, that's what being engaged and present and available. When we pause and when we find silence and solitude. Recently, I came across this article. It's by Dennis Buttimer, and he is an MED with a cancer wellness at Piedmont. And here's what he had to share about the importance of silence and solitude specifically. He said this: if you look at what is and isn't working in your life, what's not working is often because of blind spots or unconscious patterns and habits. That's what we all do when we turn the calendar, right? In 2023, we start thinking about like what worked in my life last year, what didn't work, what do I want to be different? And what he's saying is that what's not working is often because of blind spots or unconscious patterns and habits. It's things that we just do that we don't even know that we're doing it. Like I realized over the last year, because of people who really love me in my life, that when I start to feel anxious, I get like this super heightened urgency, and it vastly annoys the people around me. And they've loved me enough to tell me. And it's a red flag for me to chill out a little bit, slow down. But it was an unconscious habit that I just got into, that I just fell into. But now that I'm more aware of it, so much more helpful. But that also took not only people in my life, but it took me time with Jesus for him to help me with that anxiety and what to do with that anxiety. The other thing that this doctor has to say, he said, when you're still, you'll start to discern these habits and blind spots. By taking a break from the noise of technology and content consumption, you'll give yourself a chance to experience greater clarity. Clarity. With clarity comes better choices that lead to a more fulfilling life. So he goes on to say, what are the mental and emotional benefits of silence and solitude? Number one, clarity, as I just mentioned. Mental and emotional benefit of silence and solitude is clarity. When we're constantly running around in life, we won't be able to get clear on anything. And it's so true, because we just jump from one thing to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, and we just get ourselves busy and busy and busy, and we run this way and make sure we make this appointment, and we don't just sit and be and experience and be present. Clarity comes when we can cut the noise. We have time to process our emotions. When we practice silence and solitude, we can understand how we feel. We can begin to name our feelings. We can begin to recognize what different situations cause us to feel a certain way. But if we never pause, if we never stop, we can't find that clarity. We can't name our emotions because we're just piling stuff up over that. The other thing it does is better decision making. Get this, the brain scans show that many people's brains are overactive and hardly ever at rest these days. True, we all feel it. If the brain is hardly ever at rest, it cannot restore and regenerate, and therefore you can't think straight. Have you felt that? I've felt that. There are some days I'm like, I swear I'm smarter than this. Have you ever felt that? And you're like, I just can't even. And that just, because we are made, because God made us, we are made to rest. Our brains are literally made to have a moment of rest. Physical health benefits of silence and solitude from the same article is relaxation is a primary mechanism for healing. When you're relaxed, your body's natural repair mechanisms are enabled and you'll heal faster. Are you someone who has a bunch of tension built up in your physical body? Are you facing physical needs and stresses? Honestly, part of that could be your inability to rest. It could be because there isn't a rhythm and a pattern of rest and silence and solitude in your life. And that's just one article. And I believe that, again, God made us, and so the scientific evidence would show that our bodies, physically, emotionally, mentally, would be out of whack when we don't practice Sabbath, rest, when we don't practice silence and solitude. And so, so many times, I could research tons of articles and they would tell us the same thing. But here's what I want you to know. The core of all of that, I believe, is, again, because God made us that way, and then Jesus taught it all the time. Jesus taught us how to have and why to have silence and solitude. I'm going to talk about a few of them, and they come from Mark. And Mark is one of the Gospels that shares about Jesus' life, and we get to see the patterns and the rhythms that Jesus lived in when he was here with us on earth. And one of the rhythms was he went off for silence and solitude. In Mark 1:12-13, it says this: "At once the Spirit sent him out into the wilderness, and he was in the wilderness 40 days, being tempted by Satan. He was with the wild animals, and angels attended him." I often wonder about that story when Jesus is off and he's being tempted by Satan for 40 days, and he's in the desert. He's in the wilderness. And I often wondered when I read that, like, gosh, that had to have been so lonely. How did he face all the temptation and more than you and I face on a daily basis, and he did not succumb to the temptation? He stayed strong in his faith. I want to take us back. Mark 1:12, it says, "At once the Spirit sent him out into the wilderness." The Spirit sent him out into the wilderness. Friends, the solitude was the strength, not the weakness. So often we think that we're weak if we need to have rest. We're weak if we need to have silence and solitude. We can't do it on our own. You're not meant to do it on your own. Jesus was able to withstand the temptation because of the solitude, because that was the place where he would have the most strength that would come from his Father, from God. So he actually had the most strength in a place of solitude. Our hearts should desire that kind of solitude and that silence where we can find great strength to then come back into our life and live our life as Jesus would invite us to. See, Jesus was strongest in the wilderness. And I believe when you and I make time for silence and solitude, you will find strength in Jesus. You will find strength in Jesus. In Mark 1:35, it says, "Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed." Jesus regularly made time to connect with his Father in prayer. He got up early and he went off and he prayed. What does it look like for you to have time of prayer? I want you to begin to reflect on that's part of the pause. Pause the going and the crazy and the busy of your life and begin to think about, where are you praying? When are you praying? How are you praying? How often are you praying? That rhythm needs to be intentional in our lives. In Mark 6:31 and 32, it says this: "Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat." So Jesus is with his disciples, and they are actively doing ministry. And it says people were coming and going that they didn't have a chance to eat. Jesus said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." Find a quiet place. So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place over and over again. Jesus shows by example, and then he invited his closest followers. He said, "Come with me. Come on. Come with me as we go and we find rest. Because he knew that they could find rest in him, and they could find rest as they went off to find a solitary place. And the last thing in this scripture, towards the end, it says, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." What I want you to hear is, come with me. What would it look like in your life? Jesus is talking to you, and he's saying, come with me. I want you to pause the busy and the crazy and the chaotic and the running from here to there, and I want you to come with me. And then he said, I want you to come with me to a quiet place. He said, come on, let's go find a quiet place where we're just distraction-free and all you can hear is me. That I could whisper really quiet and you would still hear me. Come with me to a quiet place to find rest. And I just wonder, what would 2023 look like in each of our lives if we took this really seriously and we listened and we created some rhythms of rest? And can you imagine every week, every day, you can be called to be with Jesus in a quiet place and you can find rest? I believe that this way of living, this kind of lifestyle, this kind of following Jesus is needed more today than ever. And if you would have asked me a couple years ago how important this was to me, it wouldn't have been as important as it is to me today. About 5 years ago, I would say, approximately, is when I started to create some rhythms of Sabbath that are weekly, some rhythms on a yearly calendar for our family where we could find rest together. And I was the first to say, I don't need it. I don't need time with Jesus. And I don't know that I would have verbally said that out loud, but if you looked at my actions and you looked at my life would have shown that I didn't need Jesus. My life would have shown that I knew best. I knew what I wanted. I knew how to get there. And I didn't really need him. And when I started to take this seriously, when I started to decide that, you know what, I need Jesus. And I don't just need him every once in a while when I hit rock bottom. Like, I need him every day. I need him every week. And I continue to ebb and flow in this in my own life. And I will tell you, the biggest decisions in my life over the last several years have come from my quiet time with Jesus. The yeses, the nos, the not yets, the go for it, the I've called you to this, the you can keep going, all the things that my heart really needed to hear, that nobody around me, no matter how loving or how encouraging or how supporting they were meant to be, they're not Jesus' voice. And when I went to be away, when I go to be away, and when I have gone to be away, Jesus has spoke. And then, you know what? When life gets hard, when people disappoint you, when hard things happen and you lose people, when you go through things that are just really frustrating, when you have friends doing things you wish they wouldn't be doing, but you know that God has called you to a path. And you know that because you're spending time with him. And you're confident in that. That's where your confidence comes from when the world wants to shake you. Your confidence comes from that relationship with Jesus, that time with Jesus, the rest that you find in Jesus, the safety and the silence and the solitude that you find with Jesus. And I think one of the questions that we have to ask ourselves today as we head into 2023, and as we pause to reflect, is, do you want to be your best this year? Or do you want to be God's best this year? And I got to be honest, I'm scared and anxious coming back from vacation, because I love that time with my family. I love that time with my kids. Yesterday when I came out to come do my run-through, Isabel said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to go into work for a couple hours." And she said, "No, Mommy, don't go. I just want to be with you. And please don't take that anyway. I love what God has called me to. And I also love having a little space. I love having time with the people that I love. And I want to keep having that. And that's where my passion comes from for all of you. I want you to have that time, space with Jesus and with the people that you love. And so I love you, and we're going to spend a few minutes. And it might feel like a long time, but it also probably won't feel like enough. And I want you to spend this 3 minutes with Jesus. I want you to just spend this time. Alex is going to keep playing, and just spend it with Jesus. And what does he need to tell you today? What's the message he has for you today in this idea of creating some rhythms of rest, finding moments of silence and solitude? And so let's just practice that. You got 3 minutes. Jesus, speak. So Jesus, I pray for all these people. I pray for all of us that you would help us, God, to crave time with you. God, would you help us to want to have a desire to spend time with you? God, I pray that you would help us to make it a priority to make time for you, to make time for rest. God, I pray that whatever you're speaking right now, that it's just received. That, you know what, we don't need to know how right now. We don't need to figure it all out. But whatever you're speaking to each person's heart, God, would that be received? Would it be received with kindness? Would it be received in a welcoming way? God, the beauty of having a relationship with you is that we can change, but we need your help. And so, God, would you help us to find more time for you, more time to be with you and in your presence and following you. And we're going to give you all the credit and all the glory. In your name we pray.